Cast your nets to the sea. Things ain't quite what they used to be. They got my hands tied tight. Mama's home waiting for the fish to bite, to take away my blue sky. How am I supposed to survive? Say a prayer for the fisherman. Say a prayer for me. The only life I ever know is the call of the sea. Say a prayer for my father and my grandfather too. It's the only life we've ever known. Don't take my heaven, don't take my heaven from me. I know the taste of salt air. I found peace in the ocean out there. My first love was the sunrise, to follow the birds and the roll of the tide. How am I supposed to survive? They take away my blue sky. Say a prayer for the fisherman. Say a prayer for me. The only life I've ever known is the call of the sea. Say a prayer for my father and my grandfather too. It's the only life we've ever known. Don't take my heaven, don't take my heaven, don't take my heaven from me. Say a prayer for the fisherman. Say a prayer for the fisherman. Say a prayer for me. Say a prayer. It's the only life I've ever known. Don't take my heaven, don't take my heaven, don't take heaven from me. Don't take heaven, don't take my heaven, don't take heaven from me.
I've been fishing these waters for 35 years. 40 if you count the times I played hooky from school. The Pelican riding on my engine and the curtain of rain drifting east from Lake Okeechobee. Me keeping a sharp lookout for flashing mass of silver taking double somersaults in the air. Fort Pierce was once a military fort, part of a whole network of forts crisscrossing the state of Florida, one day's march apart. Well, the U.S. Army was fighting the Seminoles back then, chasing them Indians from one end of the state to other. Most everything is chased by something. Frogs chase bugs, fish chase frogs, gators chase fish, or little dogs. Gators love little dogs, particularly those with their leashes still attached. My great-great-granddaddy was sent here from Charleston to fight the Third Seminole War. Now, I was named after him, Wade Curtis, except my mama gave me the middle name of Ray because I was a ray of sunshine in her life. Well, he liked the Indian River so much, he settled on the edge of Moore's Creek. Well, leastways where Moore's Creek used to be, winding and curving its way west. That's before a couple of engineers thought they'd straighten it out and put an end to its meandering. The river was full of fish, scales glistening like silver and waters clear as gin. Scrubbed cattle rooting wild in the palmetto. Mosquitoes so thick they hung on your eyelashes, which is why St. Lucie County was named Mosquito County. Well, that's before official folks realized that they better give the county another name if they wanted settlers. My great-great-granddaddy received a commendation from General Robert E. Lee himself for dousing the lantern at the Jupiter Lighthouse so the Confederate blockade runners could outwit the Yankees. Nobody can pin down for sure the part about Robert E. Lee, but, well, leastways that's what they tell me. Commercial fishing began in my granddaddy's day. Two events gave it its kickstart. The first was the frost, 1894 to 1895, that ruined the citrus and the pineapple. The second was the arrival of the railroad in Titusville. Fish were in the waters for the taking, and Mr. Flagler's iced fish cars delivered the fish to market before it turned. Fish houses were built all over the river. Titusville, O'Galley, Sebastian, Stewart, Fort Pierce. There's still a few around, patched with tar paper, hanging lopsided like they had one too many. 30 years ago, there were 15 fish houses in Fort Pierce alone. Now there's only 3. When I was a little kid, pompano would come skipping over the water like supper plates. You could get all the big fat mullet you wanted with a cast net or a spear. We spoke a charm, cast it over the waters like the bread they talk about in the Bible. Fishy, fishy bite. Your mother said you could, your father said you would. Fishy, fishy bite. If you were real lazy, you could leave a lantern burning in a tethered rowboat, half a dozen mullet would jump in. If you didn't have a lantern, a blazing pitch pine basket would do just fine. Mullet was scared of both. That's when I thought that if you dropped a horsehair into a pail of water, it would turn into a snake. My sister and I would watch over that bucket while that horsehair drifted this way and that. We watched till nightfall. I'll tell you this. Waiting for these fishing laws to be repealed is like waiting for that horsehair to turn into a snake. It ain't never going to happen. The government says that fish stocks are dwindling, and we're to blame for bringing in too many fish. Seems like they ought to look to themselves for dredging the canals that carry dirty runoff into the river, for letting developers rip away the mangroves. Where do they think fish are going to spawn? Next to some seawall? Even fish need privacy. What I don't understand is why they let foreigners fish out our waters so that we have to import fish from the other side of the world. That's a lot of foolishness, if you ask me. Fish nobody ever heard of. Barboni, Dorado, Lovraki, Barramundi. Shoot. Fast food folks are paying air freight to fly in hoki. Now, who wants to eat a fish that sounds like something you spray up your nose? And you take countries like Russia, China. They got billions of people to feed, and well, hey, let's face it, neither one was never what you'd call a team player. Well, they're turning fishing into an industry. They're sending out great big old fishing fleets to pick our waters clean. The fish don't stand a chance. Then you got doctors heating up the other end of the argument. That's right, doctors. They're the ones who had to go tell folks eating fish was healthy. I mean, that's what drove up consumption. Between the Chinese and the doctors, it's a squeeze play. Smitty here, he likes to swap stories. He's talking to a trucker, fella who boasts that he could drive an LA turnaround in 2 days. Well, if you think that Smitty and that trucker don't have much in common, well, then I got to remind you that even alligators and bass hang together. But don't ask me why. All I know, if you see a couple of gators in a pond, especially if they're up on 4 legs, you can count on catching you some bass. Oh, I told that to a fella from New Jersey. He says, one alligator trotting like a dog was all he needed to hightail it out of there, bass or no bass. I knew he was from somewhere up north without him saying one word. I was honking down, sitting back on my heels, lighting my smoke by scratching my thumbnail across the head of a match cupped in the palm of my hands. Well, he couldn't do neither one. He couldn't get that match to light, and he couldn't honk it down without rolling backwards on his butt. Now, this New Jersey fella shows me his watch, sticks it in my face like it was a squirt clam. The thing works underwater. There's all kind of dials glowing like Gulf weed. Hell, fishermen don't need no watch. Fishermen tell time by the tide. If you know the tide was dead low at 3 in the afternoon and you find it high later that night, well, it's 9 p.m., period, end. Next week, it'll be high in the afternoon and low at night. Well, you see, the tide reverses itself every week. Something like this regulations I got to abide with. These permits, for example. You need a state permit to fish. Well, yeah, that's a specific license for a specific fish. Kingfish, wahoo, tuna, whatever. A snapper grouper permit costs $12,000. And then you need two. You need a federal permit to fish too, and you can't even get a federal permit to the year 2005. Well, unless you want to buy one from an individual who don't want to fish no more, but he's going to set his own price. Well, anyway, you need two federal permits to fish legally. Now, it don't take a rocket scientist to realize that they're trying to cut our numbers in half. Tides are better than any clock, give or take 15 minutes. The only exception is gale tides. Folks on shore know a gale is coming if they see a cat on a fence. Another sign is the shrimp scurrying out of the mangroves, birds flying low, ants covering up their ant hills, a ring around the moon. A hurricane? Oh, no, that's another story. June, too soon. July, stand by. August, look out you must. September, remember. October, all over. Best land sign of a hurricane is a good mango crop. Good thing that didn't happen last year. You can see signs of a hurricane for days ahead out at sea. Wind drops, ocean's flat, except for little swirls of current like a pot trying to boil. There is a great canyon of clouds, and the mullet rush out the inlet into the ocean where they know it's safe. I bet you didn't know that a mullet has a gizzard. Mullet likes to munch on algae and needs his gizzard to sift out the sand. Mullet and grits used to be a big meal for lots of folks around here. People who ate mullet and grits, the same folks who ate hog bone and patched their sails with flour sacks. Same folks whose word is as good as gold. Mullet munching on algae is no big thing. Fish will take all kinds of bait. I know a fella, lives in a fish shack. Him and his brother haul back from the bank, sells a dozen shrimp for $1.25. Keeps a sign over the cash register that says, if everybody knows your business, you won't have it for very long. Now here he is, sitting on top of all that shrimp, and he'd rather catch carp with dough balls. My own brother-in-law swears he caught grouper once with a hot dog. Well, he don't fish no more. Too much paperwork. He's working in concrete now. Hot as hell, pouring all that concrete in the sun, no sea breeze to cool you off. Only thing worse is roofing. I asked him if he missed the work. Fishing is hard. On your feet all day, hearing that engine banging away, 50 miles out, 4 or 5 days at a time. Sometimes a piece of gear breaks, a squall comes out of nowhere. Well, he surprised me. He said what he missed most was bringing in a big fish. When the surface of the ocean bulges and then bursts like it's given birth, Hundreds of clucking coots roosting on the waves, then taken to the air, running across the surface of the water, flapping their wings and kicking, trying to get up. Him, yanking hard with both hands, gaining a yard of line, yanking again, swinging with all his might, right, left. The tail of the fish slapping, banging, thumping its life out on the planking. The whole boat shivering like it had a fever. Now whenever I see him, he's scuttling back into his house like a ghost crab hopping back into its hole. Trout fishermen used to muffle their oars with burlap and then go to fish quiet as all get out, splashing the water in front of their lure with a water beater. The idea was to confuse the trout by creating a commotion in the water. Now that's what all these agencies are doing, creating a commotion in the water so that nobody will know what they're really up to, which is to put me out of business, plain and simple. Today's fishing industry is a sorry mess. I mean, once you get through all the red tape and the permits, then they tell you you can't fish where the fish are. Fishing is like gambling. You can't see them till you catch them. You just got to hope that they're there and that they're hungry and maybe stupid enough to confuse a metal lure for a cricket. It's a cops and robbers game where there's more cops than robbers. You got to work with quotas from the Department of Natural Resources. Log every entry like a bookkeeper. There's catch limits for certain kinds of fish. You got to abide by regulations from the state and federal fish and wildlife divisions and departments, and the Department of Weights and Measures and conservation folks, and all the ruckus created by the sports fishermen. Hell, I mean, and when you realize that fish stocks are not as good as they once were, it makes it harder and harder to earn a living catching fish. That's the problem with it all, because they keep confusing you so you're not too sure whatever is happening. There's other pitfalls to look out for. For instance, never grab a fish by its head, or its gills could slice your fingers. Some fish gills are as sharp as razor blades. The best remedy for a cut finger is plain old pine oil. Unless it's begun to throb, then you make a poultice of sugar and turpentine. The fellow who told me that used to be my pa's best friend. But he quit fishing 5-10 years ago. Last I heard, he was a groundskeeper at Dodgertown. It's not so bad. At least that's what his wife says. He gets to watch all the games, even got him an autograph or two. A fortune teller once read my palm, told me I was going to live a long life. What she was reading were the deep creased scars from handling heavy fish on the cords. She was reading the marlin from years back. Did you ever see a marlin up close? Jumping high in the air? His sword as long as a baseball bat, his pectoral fins lavender, the color of an Easter egg. Well, look at them, it's about all you can do. You can't bring them to the dock. It doesn't matter how many calluses you have, how many welts you have from man of war. When you reach out for a line, rub it softly between your thumb and forefinger. You can always feel the pull. And even when you let the line slip between your fingers, the fish never feels any tension. That's why fishermen know their way around women folk. Fishermen can always feel that first pull. It's more like a tremble, a shiver. And since he's smart, he waits. He gets a nibble, reaches out for the line, rubs it softly between his thumb and forefinger. He knows not to yank it in. He knows to let it slip between his fingers. Maybe he drops a hook over the side, makes the line fast to a ringbolt in the stern. Maybe he even baits another hook and leaves it in the shade of the bow. He's waiting for the right moment to start working the fish. These two guys used to bring in shark. They would hoist it up, block and towel, cut off the hides and soak it in brine, then send it off to China. I hear that shark's hide is a delicacy to Chinese folks, same as baby back ribs is to us. Well, after they cut off the fins and the hide, they took out the shark's liver. Now, you can believe it or not, but a shark's liver is good for 14 gallons of oil. This fella here, he could sound fish clear across the river, particularly on a quiet night. Smoke rising, a screech owl hooting from some rooftop. He didn't want to go out there and find a dry hole. He had to sound fish first before he tightened his net. But I used to watch him as a kid. Watch his circular net grow smaller and smaller. Watch a silver flashing of thrashing fish forced into a pocket. Well, here, he's bringing in swordfish, getting ready to put a knee on the carcass and cut from the back of the head to the tail, from the backbone to the belly. Now, I know for sure that these other two would rather be bringing in shark. Sometimes, when you're out on the water, you look up and see pelicans and buzzards soaring in circles over your head. Well, they're not scouting for fish. They're catching updrafts, looking to see how high up they can get that updraft to take them free of charge. Then you look down alongside the boat, you see a dolphin, shiny gold head, play in the water. Water, the same kind of blue as the sky. And you think that they're one and the same, one up, one down. Sometimes you can't even tell which is which. It's like standing at the edge of the universe, looking out at all that is or ever was. There was a letter to the editor of the newspaper. It said, regulators don't care nothing about the environment, that they're saving all the fish for the sports fishermen. I don't know how true that is. I do know that the recreational folks were the ones who could lobby, the ones who got the legislators' ear. They catch trout, then release them. You know what happens to trout when you unhook them in the summer? 50% die. Propaganda put us out of business. We should have fought for ourselves. I mean, that's the American way. Well, I don't have nothing against fishing guides personally, mind you. A few of my friends make their living strapping tourists into fighting chairs. Fishing guides got to pay the rent, same as me. I know this young fella. His grandfather, his father, and two of his uncles. His mother, Verna, makes apple beer as good as any I've ever had. Dries her peelings in the sun, puts them in the crock, and when they're ready, it is sweet as it can be. Verna swears she does not add a drop of sugar. Now, Verna's boy is smart as a whip. He knew all about fishing before he could shave. Got all kinds of equipment on his boat, radar, sonar. But that's not what makes him good. He's good because he's learned to follow the birds. The birds go after the bait fish. Wherever the bait fish are, that's where the big fish are coming in to feed. Well, that's the thing. That's why these regulations string us up tighter than any net. Fishing is not an everyday job. When the fish are there, you got to go get them. In December, when the fish run in front of a cold front, the mullet, well, you can go 2 days straight. You never know what your hours are going to be. It is not a set schedule. And the season is short. Bluefin tuna and mackerel prefer water temperatures of 68 to 75 degrees. Fisherman has a narrow window from Thanksgiving to Valentine's Day. There was another article in a magazine that I read, written by some guy from the National Academy of Science. He said that 80% of commercial fish stocks in U.S. water, mackerel, kingfish, swordfish, tuna, they're disappearing. Well, that may be true. If it is, you probably can blame that on the free trade agreement. 300-foot freighters from Taiwan or some other place, all with hydraulic net openings, sashaying back to a gigantic mothership factory that gets the fish ready for market. Oh, forget about radar and sonar. They got global positioning systems, depth finders, computers, bottom fish finding machines. It ain't the small guy like me or even the recreational folks. It's these big guys looting our waters. The fish don't stand a chance. You know what's interesting? Fishermen started the whole thing. Got the regulation ball rolling in the first place. Well, it was way before my time. It seems like an outsiders from the East Coast was coming through the state, fishing our lakes with great big old salt water nets. Local folks petitioned the legislation to do something, and they did. The legislature passed a law that regulated netting by outsiders. Now, that was the hole in the screen. If you don't want a house full of mosquitoes, you keep the screen door patched. Better still, you don't open it in the first place. Early morning sun hurts my eyes. That's why I like to fish at night. Going out to sea, one of a string of boats heading out the mouth of the inlet. Each fisherman headed for that part of the ocean where he hopes to find some fish, as long as it's not the wrong fish, the wrong spot, or the wrong time of year. I like night water best. Swirls of phosphorus, one Milky Way above me, another in my wake. Moonlight, glancing off the shell of a turtle swimming back out to sea from laying her eggs on the beach. Raccoon's going to eat most of the eggs, only 1 in 100 will survive. I bet you didn't know that the heart of a turtle will beat for hours after it's been cut up and butchered. Me and my buddies, we're like the turtle. You can cut us up, turn us into soup, our hearts will still be beating. We'll still be here, dropping a hook over the side, making the line safe to a ring bolt in the stern. Fishy, fishy bite. Your mother said you could, your father said you would. Fishy, fishy bite. Thank you for your time.